Alright, hello Internet, welcome back to Flappy Cube. We're picking up where we left off in episode 1, and we're just going to be working with physics mostly. So this is what we have so far. We have a cube, and when I press space, this button is actually configurable by the player, but when I press it, they go up. Right now, gravity is very low, and so is the force. But the cool thing is, it works, you can fly. The issue is you can't hit anything, and if you do, we can't detect it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to insert a second cube, and I guess -4 looks like a good Y position. And I'll just move it to the center and then just make it wider. We can actually just make it 10. It doesn't need to go all the way off the screen for now. It's fine how it is. Then I'm also going to tweak its box collider. We're going to use a 2D collider instead of the standard 3D one. And doesn't look like that's the right size. Oh, yes it is. You can see the light green outline. So our box is covering our entire shape. So everything looks good. So now that we do that, I can drop this box more or less, and it'll hit the ground. Now there's some issues here. And the main one is we don't know that we hit anything. There's nothing telling us as the developer that we hit the ground there. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to implement a fun little script here that's going to say we can just actually attach to pretty much the on collision of this object. I kind of am rambling here because it's been a long day. But anyway, we're going to attach to our collision, and then when we hit this object, or any object really, then we can automatically do something. And we are going to restart on collision. And so what this is going to do is it's going to restart the current scene you're in when you hit something. And so how you do that is there is a function in your mono behaviors, which is going to be just your components, called onCollisionEnter, and it's going to accept a collider, I want to say. So there's two different things that it can accept. Actually, I believe it's a collision. Sorry. So there's two different versions of this. There's onCollisionEnter, onCollisionExit, and there's also onTriggerEnter and onTriggerExit. And so I believe onTrigger is going to take colliders, which is going to be whatever entered that trigger. And then onCollisionEnter is going to take a collision, and that's going to actually return the result of that collision. So you'll get like the force that was applied and things like that. So onCollisionEnter will get a collision, and we can actually just do scene manager dot something. And when this happens, since there's a little Visual Studio issue that goes on, so it has opened the actual file and not as part of this solution. So it doesn't have references to any of Unity's components. So we need to close it and reopen it. And it's going to throw a few exceptions in the meantime. So if I do this now, and it's not liking this either, my hotkeys are broken. So we are going to load a scene, and we're actually going to just load this scene. And I don't remember how to get that, so one sec. Get active scene. And then we should be able to get the build index. And so the build index is, let me show you that. If you go into your file build settings, you're going to get scenes in the build. There's none there. I'm going to add this one quick, and you'll see this number over on the right. So on the left, you've got its name, and then on the right, you have its build number. And that is going to map to this, which is the build index. So that's how this is working. We're saying reload our current active scene with the build index of whatever it is. And that will just find whatever so you can give this a different index if you want. Like if you want to go back to the main menu, you can do that. You just need to change this And you can use the name too, that's fine. I'm just gonna do this because it's simple. And then I'm gonna delete everything else. So there's that. And now I can go and take my bird. I renamed it to bird. I don't think I did that on camera. But anyway, we've got our restart on collision, and I can just drop it now. And it should not do that. Okay, one sec. What we're going to do is we're going to add some, oh, I know what's wrong. We have on collision enter, and we're using 2D physics. So Unity distinguishes between 3D and 2D collisions, and there's different callbacks for that. So we need to use the on collision 2D enter. I think that may be spelled wrong. It may be collision enter 2D. So I'm going to actually start with that one because that feels right. And yeah, you can actually see I have a Unity plugin here, so it pops up saying what it is. So anyway, this is going to get called when our 2D collisions happen. And since we're using 2D physics, we need this, otherwise nothing's going to happen. So I can drop this again, and it will restart, and it will restart, and it will just keep going. This won't stop ever. So we now have restarting scenes. And I have a cough, but that's all right. We have a bird that can fly. So that's super basic collision detection. What we can do now is we can actually have like a world that you can fly in. And so what I'm going to do is just do this really easily. I'm not going to really get into this too much because frankly, if you're building a game, this is the part that you should be designing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a really tall, like a tall little thing like that-ish. And this is just so we can get some looping geography. Is that what the word I wanted to say? Probably not. But we're going to call it a pillar. And I'm actually going to make one a little bit above it too. So we'll make it at 4, and this one will be at 4. So if you look at this, there is just a little hole in the middle that you have to fly through. And our pillar is going to be in the center there. So I'm going to create one more component and actually call this our pillar prefab. And I'm going to drag both of these pillars into it once we center it. The centering is important because if you don't do that, it's not going to be centered in your object. And so now that I did that, we actually have our two pillars connected together. And the colliders should still be good. You can see their outline there. So we now have a pillar prefab. Then I can drag that down here. I have a prefabs folder. So I drag that down here. You can't see that. So if I bring this up, you can see we have just a little sample of what it looks like. Now, what we can do is we can take this and move it across the screen. We want this to scroll. And so there's a really easy way to do this. Well, there's a bunch of easy ways to do this, but the easiest way, probably not the right way, but the easiest way is just to create a simple script that does a move and delete. So what this is going to do is it's going to move it from right to left. So it's going to move it in the negative X position. And when it gets to a certain negative position, it's going to delete it. So public float the min X value, and then the public float of the speed. And so all this is doing is it's just going to move this pillar across the screen. So we've got our update, and I'm going to take this transforms position and subtract a vector3 dot right. No, we can just add, sorry, a vector3 dot left. So left is going to be down the left of the screen. It should be, yeah, -1, 0, 0. So -1 on the X axes and 0 on the other two. So if I multiply that by the time delta and then by the speed, we'll get a movement to the left at however big our speed is in that distance per second, that's what this formula is going to do. And so that is going to update our pillar. The issue is I haven't used this min x value thing at all. So I just want to show you what that's going to look like. So if I take that and drop it here and set like a speed of 5, for example, and we can put that over there. If I start this, nothing happens. That wasn't what I expected at all. Interesting. Yeah, don't know what's going on there. One sec. This transformed to position plus equals the vector 3. Unless did I set? No, I set the speed right. What? Huh. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what's going on here. I've clearly screwed something up, otherwise it would work. Oh. I didn't save it. That would probably fix it, right? Yeah. So you can see it moves off. And now the issue is that's going to be there forever. So that pillar, if I pause and look over, it's still going. It's never going to be seen again, but it's still going to be there. And so if you play long enough, those are all going to still be there, and that's a problem because that even though it's not there, that script is still running and it's still moving it to the left. And so that's eating resources, the model is eating resources, all of that, it's all eating our resources that we don't need. So that's why we need this delete part. And so we can do that by grabbing our actual transforms position.x and say if this is less than our min x value, then we want to destroy the game object. And so there's a quick issue that a lot of people make, one that I make way more than I should, is if you just do this, all it's going to do is destroy this game object or this component. It's not going to destroy the game object it's attached to. So all it would do is remove this script and then the pillar would just become immobile and just stay on the scene forever. We don't want that. We want the entire pillar to just disappear. And so I'm going to add, explicitly say, destroy the game object this is attached to. So now if we do this and actually stop here, there we go. So we've got our pillar moving across. We want our minimum x value to, let's say, like -10, which is going to be over like here, right around that line there. And so I can move this now and it should shoot across. And then we should see it disappear, and it did. So now that pillar was gone. I stopped. Anyway, one more second. I'm going to demonstrate that again just because I want to prove it's gone. There's nothing there anymore. And that's important because it means that those resources are not being used. I mean, there's a few things that are a little bit more advanced that you can use, like you can pool these so you don't have to keep creating them because that's expensive and slow as well. But you don't need to worry about that. And I don't know why I brought it up. Anyway, that's something that exists. What we want to do now is we just want to spawn these on an interval. And how we do that is we create a script. Let's say spawn on interval. Sure. That's what I said it was going to do, so I guess that makes sense. So what we want is we want an interval. So we'll just call it the interval, I guess. And we want a game object that we're going to create. And so we'll just call it the prefab, I guess. And then we want a private float that is a timer. And this is what's going to actually handle things. So our timer is going to be initialized. Actually, we don't even need to worry about that. Our timer can just be whatever it is. Then we can take our timer and subtract the current time, or the delta time. So this is just going to more or less count down. Then, if our timer is less than 0, then we want to actually take some action. And what that's going to mean is we need to create our prefab. So I'm going to create the prefab at our current position with our current rotation. And the rotation isn't really needed. You can just use the identity quaternion, but it's easiest just to use this. And you don't want to start working with quaternions unless you need to, because they are silly complex. So let's just leave that there, and that should be good. The only other thing we need to do is bump our timer up to our interval again. So all this script does is it's going to count down until it is below 0. Then it's going to spawn our prefab, and then it's going to reset our timer back up to whatever it is, say 5 seconds. And then it's going to count down after 5 more seconds. It's going to hit 0, spawn our prefab, and set it back up to 5 seconds. And it's just going to keep repeating that. And so this, once I actually save it correctly, can be used to just generate a bunch of these pillars. And so I can move this over, say 10. I can actually delete this now. I'm going to apply the prefab, so this script is applied and actually saved as part of the prefab. And then I'm just going to call this a spawner, for example, and drag over our spawn on interval. We want our prefab attached to that, and we'll say every 2 seconds. That may be a little bit short, but it'll show that it's working. And you can see now we get pillars every 2 seconds. And it looks more or less correct. And actually, if we hit these, we restart. So everything seems to be working, and we get more or less what we want. The gravity is a little bit funky, but that's all right. So there's that. That's pretty much our game. There's not much. Well, there's a lot more that we need. But for now, I mean, it gets you more or less Flappy Bird for. We've got what, 4 scripts and like maybe 50 lines of code and 1 prefab. This is pretty easy for this. We haven't even done any like art or anything. You haven't had to import any models. We haven't even really had to leave Unity besides to open a code editor. And you don't even need Visual Studio for this. You can use like Visual Studio Code, for example. So I think this is pretty cool. This is one of the reasons that I really like Unity, is because it's really easy to get started. You don't need to know much, and you can kind of just guess and check. And then that makes it really easy for beginners and really nice for even advanced people who want to like play around with things. If you want to edit things quickly, this gives you a good way to do that. So just to cover everything we have our orthographic camera, which is going to give us like square projection, so we don't get any perspective lines or anything. It's all 2D, so nothing's going to change with distance. Now we have our bird, which is just going to be a rigid body with a box collider on it, and that's going to have 2 scripts, the flight controller, and then our restart on collision, which just detects the collision and then restarts the game. We have our cube, which is just down here. Just a really simple box collider. You can do whatever you want. If we want, we can just copy and paste this and drag it up here, like so. And we've got one on top now. And then we have our spawner, which is going to create some pillar prefabs every 2 seconds. And then our pillar is just going to move left at 5 meters a second. And then it's going to destroy itself if it ever reaches -10 meters, which is going to be right around here. So that's our game. That's hopefully got you started with Unity, and if not, then let me know what you need to see, and I will hopefully be helpful, and if not, then I will try better. So if it was helpful, let me know. I'm curious what you guys like, what you don't like, so let me know in the comments what you like and what you don't like, what you want me to improve, things like that. And if you liked it, subscribe and hopefully watch some of my other videos. But until next time, see you, Internet.